Hello and welcome to the Speciation screencast. I'm Miss Barlow, your host. At this point, you should have all completed part 2 of your speciation packet and gotten the sub to sign off, or myself to sign off on it. If you have not done so and you're in the wrong place, to go back and finish that. Here are the learning goals for today. Pause the screencast to be able to write these down in your week 14 learning goals, which are due Monday. Just a couple of quick announcements. Number 1, your grades are up to date, so please be checking them and coming in to make up work during royal time, lunch, late start, etc. Number 2, your test is on Tuesday. Monday will be your review day. There will also be a binder check on Tuesday. The test is short so that we can move into ecology as soon as possible and do our dissections on time. All right, now to the good stuff, speciation. Since you guys just did a super intense lab with speciation, these notes are going to be a little shorter than usual. Feel free to pause whenever you need to. First up, we have some vocabulary review. So as we discovered before, a species by the best scientific definition is a group of similar organisms that can breed and produce fertile offspring. This explains why dogs, regardless of breed, are the same species, whereas a donkey and a horse are not, since mules are infertile. Adaptations we covered during natural selection, and those are inherited characteristics that increase an organism's chance of survival. For example, a polar bear contains more blubber than other bears in order to be able to withstand their frigid environment. These adaptations can lead to natural selection, or the differential success in survival and reproduction of individuals with different phenotypes resulting from interactions with their environments. These terms should all be reviewed. Now for the new stuff. Speciation defined is the gradual process of creating new species. This is caused by factors such as natural selection or chance events that change the frequencies of alleles in a population. Disclaimer: natural selection acts on phenotypes, not genotypes. This then causes a change in the population's genotypes or allele frequencies. However, it acts on phenotypes. The biological species concept states that species are members of populations that actually or potentially interbreed in nature. Now, as you saw in your clay models, after the sea level rise, some species were separated due to the water level, like the fox. This is a form of reproductive isolation and could lead to a speciation event. Just like evolution, speciation is a very slow process. Now, there are 3 ways for a population to be isolated and thus cause a speciation event. There is behavioral isolation, geographic isolation, and temporal isolation. Behavioral isolation is when the 2 populations are capable of interbreeding, but have different behaviors such as courtship rituals that prevent them from successfully interbreeding. An example would be the birds of paradise. If you recall from this video I showed you a while back about their crazy mating rituals, some have mating songs or mating dances, but if they're not the same, they will not mate. Geographic isolation is when there is a physical barrier separating the populations. This is like the mountains and islands you made in the simulation representing the Channel Islands. This could also be a body of water, a mountain range. It all depends on the species. Temporal isolation, the last one, and this is when 2 populations are capable of interbreeding, but their mating times are different. If you'll recall from the Planet Earth video, the Komodo dragon females only mate once a year, and it's a specific time. So if the male Komodo dragon doesn't find her during that time, they don't mate, and thus that could be an isolation event. There are some case studies we can talk about. For instance, the Channel Islands fox. The Channel Islands fox is the one pictured on the left, and a standard California fox is the one pictured on the right. You'll notice there's some differences. Number 1, the coloring is different, and that's to blend in with their environment a little bit better. Number 2, the size. The Channel Islands fox is smaller because it lives in a smaller environment, and the fox is a little bit larger in order to defend itself in its more harsh environment. These are all adaptations that these foxes have accumulated since being in their new location. Thus, if you study their DNA and their ability to reproduce, you might suggest that this is a speciation event in the process. The next example we're going to cover is the pygmy mammoth. You might have heard of the mammoth from the Ice Age and stuff like that. It's an ancient organism, and you'll notice that there's a separate species that developed on the Channel Islands.
About 30,000 years ago, right here where you are standing, huge Columbian mammoths roamed. They were as tall as 14 feet high and weighed up to 20,000 pounds. This low, flat coastal plain was clothed in parkland vegetation, a rich mosaic of grasses, herbaceous plants, shrubs, and trees. Mammoths of this size needed lots of food and water, spending most of every day ranging far distances to fuel their great bulk. They relied on their exceptional sense of smell to find food. Here on the coastal plain, the mammoths could catch only occasional whiffs of vegetation, since it was already heavily grazed by themselves and by other animals. However, turning toward the ocean, the hungry mammoths could smell something quite different. Here, the consistent onshore winds carried the aroma of abundant grasses and shrubs from the huge mountainous island of Santa Rosa. It was so alluringly close to them, a mere 4 to 5 miles across the sea. It was an easy decision and an easy swim to the island. No land-dwelling mammals are better suited to water than members of the elephant family, with their long snorkel-like trunks and their buoyant masts that can shed the effects of their ponderous bounds. They move so gracefully in the ocean. Once on the island, the population of mammoths increased in numbers, and eventually the food supply became scarce there too. And over time, the thick glaciers and ice sheets that covered Canada and northern Asia began to melt. The level of the sea gradually rose, stranding the mammoths and flooding the lowlands of the island. The island decreased in size and eventually was split into 4 separate islands, the ones we know today. With this decrease in island size, the food supply was ever more limited, especially in times of seasonal shortage. The smaller mammoths that could survive with less food were at an advantage. The absence of predators on the islands also contributed to the downsizing, since large size was no longer needed for predator avoidance and defense. Thus, natural selection favored smaller mammoths. Within 20,000 years, most stood only 5 to 6 feet at the shoulder, less than half the height of their mainland ancestors. These small mammoths became a new species, the Channel Islands pygmy mammoth. The replica bones that lie before you are the remains of one of these pygmy mammoths. It roamed the islands, feeding on prehistoric grasses, sharing the space with flightless geese and tiny island foxes. Then, about 12,800 years ago, along the northern coast of what we now call Santa Rosa Island, this 50-year-old arthritic male came to the end of his journey. He lay down on his left side and died. The island winds quickly buried his body with sand, his skin still intact. The demise of the rest of the pygmy mammals would follow. In fact, most of the world's large mammals disappeared from Earth about 10,000 years ago. What caused the extinction of all these large animals is still uncertain. In 1994, a clue to this mysterious past was discovered. Over time, erosion exposed this ancient animal to the eyes of the modern world. 12,000 years after the pygmy's death, its fully articulated skeleton, whose replica bones lie before you, was discovered and excavated, revealing the world's most complete pygmy mammoth skeleton ever found. You can now discover the pygmy mammoth's past on your own as you explore this interactive CD-ROM. Learn intriguing stories of mammoth origins, how they lived, why they became extinct, the discovery of mammoth fossils, the history of humans and mammoths, and the importance of the Channel Islands and ongoing preservation efforts there.
Now there's one last case study we're going to go over, and that is the scrub jay. The scrub jay is a blue bird like in the pictures. The one on the left is from the islands, and the one on the right is from the mainland. And you'll notice, again, like the foxes and the pygmy mammoth, there are some differences between the two, and that's because of its life on the island. So that concludes the screencast. By now you should have filled in all the definitions of part 3. You should be ready to move on to part 4 tomorrow and turn in this entire packet.